What are the obstacles that get in our own way? I want to bring attention to some of the most common self-sabotage that we as women have due to our patriarchal upbringing, and misogyny being the default human condition. Internalized misogyny and internalized racism too. Judging ourselves of what we can and cannot accomplish, what feels like it's the right thing for us. Typically dreaming too small or dreaming too big without any tangible strategies. But also, more than anything, what gets in the way for us as women, especially for women of color, is male-centeredness. How this manifests can really vary from woman to woman, but regardless of where you're at in your accomplishment level, it can really become one of your biggest enemies. First of all, you may have this foundational feeling or thought that you as a woman are not enough to run something important like an organization or even a family. You need a man, you need someone in charge, you need someone to help you feel secure, and that image is always a man. You may also believe in a greater force who is in the shape of a man, like a form of a god. Those of you who have spiritual practices, maybe you do ancestral veneration and it's always a man, a male ancestor who's looking after you. Different aspects of how you may view yourself, even looking at your accomplishments as a masculine trait. Seeing you in a leadership role as being a woman who is manly or masculine. Being assertive, being uncomfortable, having clear boundaries, creating a lot of shame because you are behaving like someone who doesn't belong to your gender. These are all different ways that internalized misogyny can manifest. And when you have these forms of mental weaknesses, where you have a lot of self-doubt, you have trouble sticking to the work, you procrastinate because of fear, or you get to a power position but you tend to defer responsibility to somebody else, typically a man, you need male approval, you need a man to say yes. I have seen women do this even as they're running a multi-million-dollar business. These are weaknesses that make it very easy for a woman to be targeted. Now, I want to switch our direction a little bit while you're self-reflecting and thinking about how you show up as a leader and a professional woman in your industry, in your business. We also want to look at how much capitalism in general likes to leverage these weaknesses to take advantage of women. All women struggle from patriarchal systemic problems. All of us have systemic patriarchal trauma as well. Typically, this becomes so blatantly obvious when a woman is balancing their career and traditional feminine roles such as motherhood or taking care of elders in the family, such as your aging parents. The responsibility that surpasses a full-time job will often fall on a woman's back, while the system itself and the agents of the system refuse to lend the woman a hand. This is where a lot of cults come out and reach out to women. MLMs do the same thing. And then I want to look at the life cycle of a very successful woman who has all the talent and the fame and fortune that follows, but the weakness of being a woman in patriarchy is unforgiving to her. To start, I want to use LuLaRoe as an example of a type of opportunity that targets a woman who is in an impossible situation due to systemic issues. Oftentimes, LuLaRoe targeted single moms, stay-at-home moms who cannot work anymore but needs to bring in an income. So we're talking lower and lower middle class, even middle class women. If you go and watch the Amazon Prime LuLaRich documentary series, you see that this company is 100% the worst kind of capitalistic model, which is what an MLM is. The pyramid schemes are based on an extreme capitalistic model where it's profit at all costs. A capitalistic model is a very narrow top of those who benefit the most and the rest has to work. And actually, our society is built like a pyramid scheme. It's a little funny to see an MLM or a so-called pyramid scheme being targeted when our whole society actually is a pyramid scheme where the top elites, the top 1% are benefiting off of the labors of everybody else. We live in a tiered system, and that's how MLMs and quote-unquote pyramid schemes also function in a more blatantly obvious way than most corporations. Even if nobody wants to address it, white supremacy is a core element of LuLaRoe and other forms of MLM-like companies. You see at the top of the pyramid, everyone happens to be white. The chief founder that bleach blonde hair, the stereotypical MAGA woman look, and of course they're Mormons, preaching traditional family values. After a certain level of success, there's a lot of relationship that happens between the founder and their whole family that runs the business and the people who are the top producers. Some of the top producers are married couples. Either the woman started first and then her husband came on board, or they started together as a couple. And of course, when the business starts to become big, there's going to be a lot of power struggle in their marriage and relationship. To address that, the founder, Deanne, allegedly told one of these married women who are having some trouble, all you have to do is get on your knees and satisfy your husband for 5 minutes, and then your marriage is good to go again. Apparently, the founder, Deanne's mother, also wrote some book on femininity, which has all to do with traditional trad wife type of content that you see a lot on social media right now. Majority of the people who are at the top of these types of companies or industry almost always tend to be white people. The early joiners, or the people who tend to be closest to the founders, tend to be white people as well. And the ones who have to work the hardest, including the people in the head office, that's where we start to see people of color. It's a template. Go and look at any of these types of businesses and you'll see the same thing. The majority of the people being exploited are working class white women, and then we have women of color. The ones who are benefiting the most are patriarchal white women and their partners and their children. But again, in the capitalistic tier, we see that a lot of married white women with the same ideologies, they're also the ones being exploited. The whole family, their traditional family values, they follow the whole template, but they're still subject to being exploited. So what does LuLaRoe or companies like that target? They are targeting women who are coping in an oppressive system. Now that you have children, you can't work anymore, you can't bring in income, your husband's income's not enough. Getting into this type of situation happens when you don't have enough awareness in capitalism, which is the very definition of somebody who is oppressed and has had an oppressed upbringing, to not even be able to speculate that when you have children, you're going to run into all of these issues, namely financial first. Obviously, there was no financial literacy taught, no money conversation, no clear planning with career trajectory, basically feeling very lost in the system, where once you have children, you are now cornered to the very tightest corner to experience systemic misogyny and capitalistic abuse. And the fact is that in capitalism, there is no kindness or nurture or any freebie. If you make a mistake, you pay for it, and the cost is tremendous. So these women are looking for opportunities where they can make money without having to leave home, without long commute, without having to spend so much time away from their children and their family. You see, this is a systemic problem that we have in our society, where motherhood is not valued. The society needs motherhood, but motherhood is the last priority. And also, systemic oppression loves to keep the oppressed even more oppressed, or any privileged who doesn't follow the rules to become oppressed, because you basically become the bottom cog, the pawn that runs the whole system. So those who manage to get to the top, or those who are already at the top, will benefit even more from your oppressive labor. What I'm coming down to say is that if you do not understand your own weakness as a woman, you will fall prey to all sorts of culty, exploitative business opportunities, so-called, or career opportunities, are designed to grow by leeching off of your labor while you experience tremendous rock bottom and downfall. I think the funniest part of LuLaRoe was that there was one black woman who ends up working at they call it the home office. I guess that's the headquarters, in the office part of the business. And she wears Chanel on her first day, which means that she is the only fashionable person in all of the proximity of the office and anyone who works for this company. She runs into the founder, Deanne, and Deanne basically looks her up and down, which is a very supremacist thing to do to a black woman, you know, with her glasses like this, and tells her that she needs to change out of her Chanel to put on LuLaRoe. Now, I'm going to go into more details of what type of women get sold to this type of company. First of all, women who don't know who they are because they've been so oppressed. So that means you don't understand fashion, you don't have fashion sense, you don't have a sense of personal style. So what comes in disguised with these types of opportunities is preying on women who don't have a good sense of what the worldly standards are when it comes to fashion and self-expression. It's like taking baby steps to wearing something that you feel like it's an extension and expression of yourself. I've been very vulnerable in my life when I run into many of these oppressive issues myself. If you're a woman who's built a career, you would have. All of us go through vulnerable times. But the reason why LuLaRoe would have never resonated with me is because the clothing is, I'm just gonna say it, they're ugly. It's not fashionable. They're ugly. The prints are obnoxious and weird, and maybe once in a while you run into something that is maybe passable, wearable, and by no means, if you thought this was really good fashion choice at a time in your life, I am not here to insult you. I'm just letting you know from a lens of, let's say, fashion industry standards, this is ugly clothing. If you resonate with that, then that's where your mindset is. And if you want to be more sophisticated and quote unquote high value, if you want to be perceived as somebody with taste and class, then maybe you need to hear this. Second of all, what they really capitalize on is another form of women's weakness, which is the lack of community. Most oppressed women have never been held space, never have had nurture, never really had friends, or have a lot of social anxiety, and they're unable to make friends. Capitalizing on that, LuLaRoe offers this kind of false community, false friendships, but really is all transactional and very exploitative. When I offer my coaching to clients, it is very clear that there is a transaction. Whereas in LuLaRoe, there doesn't seem to be that. They really focus. It's like, oh yeah, you have to pay for it to even get started. It's $5,000 to like 10 grand or 9 grand or something like that. You have to buy your stock and then you have to start selling it. There is that, but it's almost like they don't want you to pay attention to that. Give me the money, but don't pay attention to that, right? They're pretending like this is more of like a community. They're really selling that friendship vibe and the boss babe, the false empowerment, which resonates with women. In addition to not having had real relationships or the inability to make friends, just having a lot of social awkwardness, inability to read social cues, which would be one of the reasons why they get sucked into something like this. Because if you have social intelligence, you realize, oh, this is a form of manipulation. I mean, it's 100% manipulation. If you have a level of intersectional intelligence, you also realize this is extremely white supremacist. So why do you want to be there? It's also extremely patriarchal. Even if they're not saying something misogynistic, you can feel that through the interactions and certain expectations and how the leaders of the company embody and carry themselves. These are all forms of weaknesses of how women get sold. And also they keep talking about these traditional family values, which if you've been oppressed by the patriarchy, then you're gonna be male centering until you've done a lot to dismantle and heal through the oppressive programming that you've been indoctrinated with from before you were born. Because your mother, your grandmother, everybody, every woman generationally has been indoctrinated with the same devaluation of women. And that's the core of any woman's trauma walking this earth. Then they're selling like married couple happiness and lifestyle, traveling, also appealing to women who've had no financial education, who have been very working class. Maybe their mothers were doing labor in and out of the house. No doubt if I were to get to know those women a lot better, probably many of the women ancestors, whether that's their mother, grandmother, worked as cleaners or in sex work or any kind of really menial type of jobs. If you have that kind of history, it makes you really susceptible to be sold to these types of simple answers to extremely complex systemic issues and trauma that you're experiencing. Accelerating action is one aspect of what we need to demand, but then there's this aspect of what are the type of messages that you get sold to because you have susceptibility to self-sabotage and exploitation. As I was watching the Lula Rich documentary, because I've been online for 8 years, I've forgotten a lot of things of what used to be popular online. And one of the hashtags that was really, really popular around 2016, 17, 18-ish was hashtag retire my husband, or any kind of headline like retire my husband with this business opportunity. Those are super popular. It was as popular as the trad wife content that is really popular right now, which both are very misogynistic and extremely patriarchal, basically turning women into slaves. I've had clients who want to retire their parents, retire their husbands, retire their whole family. Like, this is what women want to do. It's a weakness. Their weakness has to do with validation through relationships, being the savior, codependency. And a lot of different types of influencers, businesses, marketers will use that weakness to target you, to deter and distract you from achieving your real goals, to be in service of yourself when it comes to your career success. One of the greatest women's weaknesses of all is finding the wrong man, partnering with the wrong man. A woman's greatest weakness is relationship, needing to validate your environment, needing to please other people at the expense of yourself, trying to cope in systemic oppression using simple answers. Then you have a lot of sharks and prey just dying to take advantage of you. Doesn't matter how much we accelerate forward unless we look at the ways that we get in our own way. Protection, discernment, and taking actions that serve us. This is the foundational requirement of reaching our potential as women. 80% of what it requires for someone to be successful, which is the right focus and the right congruent actions to reach those goals. Also, this whole idea around servant leadership really rubs me the wrong way. Because again, it appeals to the weaknesses of women wanting to be in service of others and seeing that as a superior. Oh, I'm not one of those bad leaders. I am a good leader. But ultimately, when you come from that mindset, you're not working with the misogyny that are the implicit unconscious foundation of other people. In fact, I always talk to my clients that even parenting is a leadership position, and most people don't think of it that way. And if you show up as a servant leader in any of these organizations, and yes, your children will also be laced with misogyny because that's just the way the world works and that's how the world has trained them, then you really walk into all of these relationships, your whole environment becomes parasitic. And instead of uplifting you by being the right conditions for you to succeed, you just become that person who is constantly putting out fires. Instead of building, you are fixing. You are supporting somebody else instead of nurturing yourself to make your dreams come true. All of which has to do with messages that resonate deeply with women who want to have an easy answer without having to change any of the problematic issues in their life to fix the problem. The natural inclination is that we want to minimize disruption. So we want an answer, a solution that's going to not challenge too much in our environment, but empower us to make it all work somehow magically and come out as winners when the system has been designed to be against you. This is the truth with white supremacy, with people of color, especially women of color, and patriarchy. When you're a woman facing capitalism, you are going to try to regulate yourself a lot by using relationships. It's very typical for women to try to get into a romantic relationship when they're in a transition in their career, when they're starting a business, when they need business advice or help, when they're feeling self-doubt, they're looking for a man. When they feel really insecure in some area of their life, when parenting isn't going well, when you yourself are seeing the detrimental impact of not having worked on your patriarchal trauma, to empower your mindset in a way that is actually empowering rather than in a boss babe, toxic positivity, spiritual bypassing way, you're going to see the results, and results are going to show you exactly what's been going on. And instead of facing that, you're going to just look for a man because your mind is paved to think that way. When you have had the same thoughts over and over again, it's like you built a highway from the problem to solution. You have seen your mother, your aunt, all these women around you, the message in the media telling you that you need a man or you're not complete. Other people giving you validation. If I were to say, come out here and say I met a man, a lot of people are like, wow, congratulations. Like, I know that content's gonna go viral. If I talk about being a good mother, that content's gonna go viral. Ton of people giving me validation because I am fitting into the mold they expect me to fit into. But then if I come out and talk about other aspects that are going to be more of a solution, but it's too complex now, it's too much to digest, it's too many nuances, then it's not so interesting. It's gonna have much less mass appeal. And this is a decision that I had to make very early on with how I put myself out there, with my content, with what kind of coach I am. Doing the work for you as a woman, especially a woman of color, you are going against systemic oppression. So if success happens way too easily for you, then you should really question where you're being fooled. Also, where you're being exploited, but you're not realizing it. You don't have the lens to see yet. And learning to see is what's going to help you navigate the pitfalls, the negative consequences of having quick success. If it's taking too long, maybe you are working against the system too much. So there needs to be a nuanced dance between making sense to people based on the implicit unconscious biases and at the same time not conforming and falling into the stereotype, the expected role, which for most women and women of color especially is going to be some kind of service, helper, maid-like, slave-like role. Also, all of us have value system and we choose whether we want to be the agent of the patriarchy or not. And what does it even look like when you're not? But how do you also resonate with people whose mindset is very much set to expect that from you? All of these nuances are what we consider when we talk about social elegance. Whether you're a woman in leadership, you're a woman in business, you are on social media, you need to influence and persuade people. You want to do it in a way that builds your long-term career, not a short-term attention-grabbing, get-rich-quick scheme, which doesn't exist anyway. Long-term career, who you want to be in this world, how you want to be the change that you want to collaborate in creating. If you'd like to train with me in social elegance, go down to the description and find the social elegance presentation to book a call with my team. You can read my book, Bad Bitch on Top, which outlines all the different ways that you can truly empower yourself as a woman in the system of capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. Our Bad Bitch on Top membership program offers training in all other areas that are outlined in the book, except for social elegance, which is a separate training, as I mentioned. Thanks for watching and see you in my next video.